All right, so welcome back. We're real quick going to talk about grouping. This is a quick one, so let's just dive in. I'm going to grab and just make myself a 500 pixel by 500 pixel artboard or page, and I'm going to rename that to grouping because that's what we're going to talk about real quick. So when we looked at layers, we threw some shapes out, and we decided that, well, with those shapes, I'm going to change their fill colors just to make them stand out a little bit. With those shapes, we could change how they were oriented top to bottom, basically how they were on top of each other. Okay. So for example, right now, the green polygon or the green hexagon is on top of everything, but we could take it and drag it over here underneath the ellipse, but still on top of our square in the back or rectangle in the back. So layering allows you to put things in stacks. Grouping, on the other hand, allows you to combine or connect all sorts of different materials across layers temporarily. Okay. So, for example, let me slide this out of the way. Let's say you are building a shape, and for some reason you're going to use the pen tool, and you say, well, I'm going to draw that line, and then I'm going to draw this line here, and then again, this line here. Okay. So we've got these four lines that together make an odd-shaped parallelogram. Now, to move them all together without them moving apart, you could drag all the way across to select them all, and then you can drag them all as a group. That works. But now imagine that you have these shapes as well. In order to grab all of them, if you try and drag across, you're going to grab these shapes in the background too. So you'd have to hold down Shift and click on each of those shapes to unselect them so that you only had your shapes out here. Or the other way would be to click on each individual line, hold down Shift on your keyboard, and then keep clicking each individual line. That would also allow you to grab, each of those pieces, okay? But that's not always the easiest way to do things. So I'm going to move these again out of the way a little bit. So the other thing we can do is we can call grouping. And what grouping does is it takes a bunch of separate elements and sort of connects them and holds them together temporarily. It's not permanent. It's not like going to modify path and then joining paths or connecting path lines. Okay. It's not permanent like that. It's just temporary. It's something we can undo later really easily. So to group things, we're going to select everything we want to group. We're going to go to modify, and we're going to group the selection. Notice it says selection, so it only groups what you have already highlighted. Hit group selection. And now if I click on one of those lines, it holds them all. Okay, they're all temporarily connected, so I can move them without a problem. If I have other shapes underneath them, it's really easy to grab all four of the lines and shift them however I want. And what's really nice is that if I move, say I have to move that just off to the side a little bit, once I do this, let's say I decide, well, I need to modify this shape a little bit. I can come back to modify and come down to ungroup selection right here. And if I ungroup the selection, they've broken up. And now I have access to each individual piece. And something else to remember is that the pieces don't have to be touching. They don't have to be connected. So for example, I can now take these three lines, notice they're highlighted over here in my layers panel. I can go modify and group. Now, something to notice. When I modified them, it puts them in a group in the layer, and that group is now its own level in the layer. So I cannot take these. For example, if I move this one all the way to the front, I can't move just this one line or this one line to the top above this shape because they're inside this group. I'd have to move the entire group all the way to the top. So that's about the only real downside of grouping, is that your entire group has to sit on the same layer in the image, and you can't have a group on different layers. And in fact, you'll notice, I'm going to go ahead and ungroup these real quick, that depending on what you select, so for example, I have my ellipse, my rectangle, and this path. So I've got this line, the ellipse, and my rectangle. Right now, there are three separate pieces in my layers. When I create the group, it moves them to whatever the topmost layer is. So it's obviously going to move that. Now you can shift it afterwards, but just be aware that it is going to change how they're layered because it smushes them all together. But that's grouping. It's just a way to connect things temporarily so you can use those to move stuff around or to keep different shapes from separating apart from each other, and keep stuff organized in your artwork. And that's sort of the basics of grouping and how that works.